A growth factor is a naturally occurring substance capable of stimulating cellular growth, proliferation, healing, and cellular differentiation. Usually it is a protein or a steroid hormone. Growth factors are important for regulating a variety of cellular processes. Growth factors typically act as signaling molecules between cells. Examples are cytokines and hormones that bind to specific receptors on the surface of the target cells. They often promote cell differentiation and maturation, which varies between growth factors. For example, bone morphogenetic proteins stimulate bone cell differentiation, while fibroblast growth factors and vascular endothelial growth factors stimulate blood vessel differentiation. Growth factors versus cytokines. Growth factor is sometimes used interchangeably among scientists with the term cytokine. Historically, cytokines were associated with hematopoietic cells and immune system cells. For the circulatory system and bone marrow, in which cells can occur in a liquid suspension and not bound up in solid tissue, it makes sense for them to communicate by soluble, circulating protein molecules. However, as different lines of research converged, it became clear that some of the same signaling proteins the hematopoietic and immune systems used were also being used by all sorts of other cells and tissues during development and in the mature organism. While growth factor implies a positive effect on cell division, cytokine is a neutral term with respect to whether a molecule affects proliferation. While some cytokines can be growth factors, such as GCSF and GM-CSF, others have an inhibitory effect on cell growth at proliferation. Some cytokines, such as Fase ligand, are used as death signals. They cause target cells to undergo programmed cell death or apoptosis. The growth factor was first discovered by Rita Levi-Montalcini, which won her Nobel Prize. Classes of growth factors. Individual growth factor proteins tend to occur as members of larger families of structurally and evolutionarily related proteins. There are many families, some of which are listed below: adrenomedallin, angiopoietin, autocrine motility factor, bone morphogenetic proteins, ciliary neurotrophic factor family, ciliary neurotrophic factor, leukemia inhibitory factor, interleukin 6, colony stimulating factors, macrophage colony stimulating factor, granulocyte colony stimulating factor, granulocyte macrophage colony stimulating factor, epidermal growth factor, ephrin B3, erythropoietin, fibroblast growth factor, fetal bovine somatotrophin, GDNF family of ligands, glial cell line derived neurotrophic factor, neuroturin, Persephone artemin, growth differentiation factor 9, hepatocyte growth factor, hepatoma derived growth factor, insulin, insulin-like growth factors, insulin-like growth factor 1, insulin-like growth factor 2, interleukins, IL-1 cofactor 4, IL-3 and IL-6. Activates T cells. IL-2 T-cell growth factor. Stimulates IL-1 synthesis. Activates B cells and NK cells. IL-3 stimulates production of all non-lymphoid cells. IL-4 growth factor 4 activated B cells, resting T cells, and mast cells. IL-5 induces differentiation of activated B cells and eosinophils. IL-6 stimulates Ig synthesis. Growth factor for plasma cells. IL-7 growth factor for pre-B cells. Keratinocyte growth factor, migration stimulating factor, macrophage stimulating protein, also known as hepatocyte growth factor-like protein. Myostatin, neuregulins, neuregulin 1, neuregulin 2, neuregulin 3, neuregulin 4. neurotrophins, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, nerve growth factor, neurotropishin-3, neurotropishin-4, placental growth factor, platelet-derived growth factor, renalase, anti-apoptotic survival factor, T-cell growth factor, thrombopoietin, transforming growth factors, transforming growth factor alpha, transforming growth factor beta, tumor necrosis factor alpha, the vascular endothelial growth factor, WNT signaling pathway, growth factors in platelets. The alpha granules in blood platelets contain growth factors PDGF, IGF-1, EGF, and TGF-beta, which begin healing of wounds by attracting and activating macrophages, fibroblasts, and endothelial cells. Uses in medicine. For the last 2 decades, growth factors have been increasingly used in the treatment of hematologic and oncologic diseases and cardiovascular diseases such as neutropenia, myelodysplastic syndrome, leukemias, aplastic anemia, bone marrow transplantation, angiogenesis for cardiovascular diseases,